So we're back again. Hope you're all doing well, guys. Hope you're all doing great, and I apologize for not uploading as I said I was gonna do daily uploads. But 2020 is crazy. There are a lot of things going on here. You can't script it. So what we have here is an i3-2120. It's a dual-core hyper-threaded CPU clocked at around 3.3 GHz, was released somewhere in 2011, 2012, so that's a really old CPU. We're here to see whether our dual cores still worth it or not, and should you get one of them if you have some money. I mean, it's for around 15 bucks. But spoiler alert, if you live in the United States or somewhere near, just don't. So we are pairing this CPU with an RX 470 8GB, which is too overpowered for this CPU, I know that. But the thing is, the RX 470 right now, you can get it for as little as $60 and all the way to 100 bucks. So it's a very good GPU for the price. And let's see how far can this CPU, bear up the RX 470. We are going to compare it with an i5-9400F, and I'll leave a link to where I got the results down in the description. And the other way is to see how good of a performance can we get by lowering down the settings. First game we tested was Rainbow Six Siege, and we got really interesting and freaking good results. We were testing the games at ultra settings with FXAA enabled. The i5-9400F got 99 frames per second, while 1% lows was around 81 frame rate. The i3-2120, surprisingly enough, and we're not gonna see that again, it got 88 frames per second average and 1% lows or minimum 31.4 frames per second. So that's actually very low, and that means that you're gonna get frame rates dipping all over the place, but the average is good. So yeah, it's actually a good stretch for it. Next up, we got Fortnite, and the i5-9400F at 1080p high settings got 79 frames per second average and a minimum of 64 frames per second, while the RX 470 at 1080p competitive settings with the i3, where everything was set on the lowest except for the view distance, was set at epic, got somewhere around over 60 frames per second as an average and around 30 frames per second. Now keep in mind, this is chapter 2. The results were based on the chapter 1, so yeah, there are some difference here and there in performance. But anyways, looking at the i3, at some intensive battles you'll find the CPU actually not keeping up with the GPU, and the frame rates will go all the way down to around 40 or 45 frames per second. You might see some stutters here and there, so it's actually pretty laggy, so I wouldn't recommend you play at 1080p. Actually, I myself was playing at around 720p, but now stretch res is back, so I guess yeah, you can get more performance and not lose a lot of quality. Now next up, we got Far Cry New Dawn at ultra settings. The i5 got 65 frames per second, while 53 frames per second at minimum, while the i3 got around 34 frames per second as an average and a minimum of 2 frames per second. So it's not a stable gameplay at all at ultra settings, but I have played this game at high settings. I got around 30 frames per second, but it wasn't an average. But on medium, I got 30 frames per second stable, but I haven't got into intense gaming. So yeah, Far Cry New Dawn is a really beautiful game. You should check it out, but I guess these type of games should be played at 60. But anyways, it is what it is. Next up, we got World War Z, and at ultra settings, the i5 got 98 frames per second average and 71 minimum, while the i3 got really bad results. It got 16 frames per second average at ultra settings and 1 at minimum. So yeah, it's really bad. So I tried to play that game at 1080p low settings, and the resolution scale is set to somewhere low. I actually can't remember, and I got barely 30 frames per second in some scenarios, and other I was getting all the way up to 45, so you can get it playable. But damn, look at the freaking difference. A game like Csgo, for example, you can get all the way to 85 frames per second at a 1080p low settings with a GPU like that. So the bottom line is it worth it to have this CPU? Yes, in some way. If you have a low-end gaming PC, you got a GPU like a GTX 650 and R7 250, like a low-end GPU, you can get a good gaming experience, but you'll be missing on a ton if you got this CPU and a GPU like an RX 470 or even a GTX 1050. Trust me, the bottleneck is real. So that's the bottom line, and this CPU right now is for around $10 to $15, but you can get a Xeon E3 1225 for around the same price, and it's a quad-core CPU, and you'll find a night and day difference. Like, you can get Fortnite to be played at 120 frames per second as an average, and the minimum will be so damn good, it's not gonna be a stuttery mess. So with that said, guys, I hope it was entertaining enough and helpful to some of you. Now keep in mind the recording resolution of the games were set to the lowest I could, because I didn't want to put much strain on the CPU, which is the i3. I didn't want to have that big of a performance difference while recording and not. So thank you for watching, and subscribe and check out the links in the description where you can get an i5 9400F or Ryzen 5 2600. I'll see you in the next one, and peace.